Eleanor sat quietly by the window of her small but well-kept home, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of the teacup resting on the table. The late afternoon light spilled golden and soft across the faded floral wallpaper and the stacks of unopened letters that cluttered the corner. Outside, a gentle breeze carried the distant laughter of children playing in the street and the familiar hum of neighbors tending their gardens. She watched the scene with a faint ache in her chest. Life went on outside her walls, vibrant and full, but inside she felt trapped in a stillness she could neither escape nor embrace. Years of giving, of bending herself to the needs of others, had worn her down to a fragile core. She had spent decades quietly supporting her family, not just emotionally, but with money, favors, and endless sacrifices. It was as if she had become the glue holding them all together. Yet no one had ever paused to ask how she was really doing. Her eyes drifted to the battered phone lying on the table beside her. It buzzed softly with a message from her son Mark. She had seen his name so many times over the years, sometimes with a question about bills, sometimes a vague complaint, often a request for money. Tonight, the message was different, more urgent, tinged with frustration. But Eleanor was tired. Tired of being the family's safety net that never held firm for herself. She hesitated, then dialed his number. The line rang once, twice, then Mark's weary voice answered. "Mom," he said. "I was just about to call you." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Mark," she said slowly. "I've been thinking a lot lately. I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" he asked, confusion threading through his tone. "This," she said. "Always being the one to fix things, to pay for things, to put everyone else's needs before my own. I'm not saying I don't love you all, but I'm exhausted." Mark was silent for a moment. "Mom, you don't have to do this alone," he said gently. "It's not about doing it alone," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the tremor inside. "It's about learning to stand on your own 2 feet. You're not children anymore. You and Cynthia have jobs. You have your lives. I'm nearly 80 years old. I can't keep carrying the weight for everyone." There was a long pause. She pictured Mark running a hand through his hair, wrestling with the words she'd just spoken. "We need you, Mom," he finally said, his voice low and strained. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Eleanor's heart clenched at his desperation. But she knew her own truth. "You need to find a way," she said softly. "Not because I want you to struggle, but because it's the only way you'll grow. And so will I." When the call ended, Eleanor sank back into her chair, exhaustion settling over her like a heavy blanket. The walls of the house seemed to close in, memories flooding in, the late nights spent on the phone negotiating debts, the holidays she had spent alone while the family gathered elsewhere, the anniversaries marked quietly with a single candle for her late husband, James. She remembered how she had once been full of dreams and plans, a woman who loved to paint and travel, who longed to write stories and dance in the rain. But those things had faded beneath the weight of duty and sacrifice. For years, she had given until there was nothing left, until even her own needs were whispers lost in the storm of others' demands. Outside, the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the garden where a single rose bush bloomed stubbornly against the coming dusk. Eleanor glanced at it and felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. A life where she could finally remember how to be Eleanor, not just the family's provider. With a deep breath, she reached for an old travel magazine resting on the table. Pages filled with sun-drenched vineyards, cobblestone streets, and ancient ruins beckoned softly. She traced a finger along a photograph of a quiet Italian village, imagining herself wandering those streets with a light heart. The phone buzzed again. This time, a message from her lifelong friend Maya popped up. "Thinking of you. Let me know if you want to talk." Eleanor smiled faintly. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start talking about herself for a change. The morning light filtered softly through the lace curtains as Eleanor stirred awake. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the usual tightness in her chest, the silent pressure of obligations and expectations pressing down on her even before she opened her eyes. Instead, there was a tentative calmness, like the fragile quiet between storms. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the cool wood floor beneath her feet, and glanced at the stack of unopened mail waiting patiently on the dresser. Bills, letters, reminders. Each one a small weight she had carried for so long without complaint. Today she would open them. Not to worry. Not to solve everyone's problems. But simply to acknowledge what was hers and what was not. After breakfast, Eleanor called Maya. Her friend's warm voice was like sunshine, instantly easing the shadows in her mind. Eleanor, how are you holding up? Maya asked. Honestly. Eleanor hesitated. A little scared. I feel like I'm stepping into the unknown. That's okay, Maya assured her. You've spent so long putting others first. It's natural to feel uncertain when you start putting yourself first. But remember, you deserve happiness and peace. Eleanor smiled. Thank you, Maya. I'm trying to believe that. The phone call was a lifeline. It reminded her that she wasn't alone in this, even if her family sometimes made her feel isolated. Later that afternoon, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, a notebook open before her. She was making a list, not of debts or chores but of dreams, hopes, and small things she wanted to reclaim. Take painting classes. Visit Italy. Read novels without guilt. Meet friends for coffee. Learn to say no. The words felt foreign yet exhilarating. Each one was a small rebellion against the years of self-neglect. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, Mark stood there, his face tight with worry. Mom, can we talk? He asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Eleanor nodded slowly and led him to the living room. She noticed the tired lines etched deeper on his face, the weight of unspoken troubles settling between them. I heard you're changing things, Mark began carefully. About the money, the support. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. Yes, I am. Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. You know we rely on you. The bills, the mortgage, the kids' school. I know, Eleanor said softly, and I've carried that burden for too long. But it's not sustainable, not for me and not for you. Mark paced the room, his footsteps uneven. But what do you want from me? From us? I want you to stand on your own, Eleanor replied firmly. I want you to stop treating me like a bank. To learn responsibility, to respect my limits. Mark stopped and looked at her, pain flashing in his eyes. It's not that simple. We're struggling. Then struggle, she said quietly. But struggle with dignity, not dependence. The room fell into heavy silence. Mark's face hardened for a moment, then softened again. I don't want to lose you, Mom. You won't, Eleanor assured him. But you have to meet me halfway. This isn't about money. It's about respect and honesty. Over the next few days, Eleanor felt the shift ripple through her family. Phone calls came less frequently, and when they did, the tone was different, more cautious, less demanding. Mark seemed distracted, often avoiding her gaze when they spoke. One afternoon, Cynthia, Mark's wife, stopped by unexpectedly. Eleanor was surprised to see her, and even more surprised when Cynthia spoke openly. Her usual guarded demeanor softened. I know things have been hard, Cynthia said, and maybe we haven't been the best family, but I want you to know. I respect your decision. Eleanor nodded, grateful for the rare moment of honesty. Thank you, Cynthia. That means a lot. Still, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Eleanor could feel the unspoken frustrations in family gatherings, the sideways glances, the clipped answers, the subtle attempts to test her resolve. One evening, as Eleanor prepared dinner, her phone buzzed with a message from Mark. We need to talk. Can you come over? Her heart tightened. She hesitated, then replied, yes. When? Later that night, in the dim light of Mark's living room, the conversation unfolded slowly. Mark spoke of fears, of financial collapse, of the children's future, of losing the safety net Eleanor had provided. Eleanor listened patiently, acknowledging their fears but holding firm to her boundaries. You're strong enough, she said gently. You don't need me to save you. As the night deepened, Eleanor realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be hard, fraught with conflict and pain, but also growth and healing. She was no longer the silent giver, the invisible support. She was Eleanor, strong, determined, and ready to claim her life. As she left Mark's house that night, the cool air filled her lungs, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope flicker in her chest. Days turned into weeks, and Eleanor began to feel a quiet strength settle inside her. It was subtle at first, a gentle voice nudging her forward, a small spark of courage flickering to life. She found herself savoring moments she had long forgotten. A morning walk through the neighborhood park, the feel of paintbrushes on canvas, a phone call with Maya that didn't revolve around problems but laughter and shared dreams. She had enrolled in a local art class, something she had put off for years. Each week surrounded by strangers with their own stories, Eleanor felt layers of worry peel away, replaced by an unexpected joy. The colors, the textures, they awakened a part of her soul that had been dormant for too long. But while Eleanor bloomed in her newfound freedom, the undercurrents of tension in her family grew stronger. One afternoon, as she returned from class, her phone buzzed with a message from Cynthia. It was brief, almost hesitant. "We need to talk. It's about Mark." Eleanor's heart sank. She knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. That evening, Cynthia arrived at Eleanor's home. The usual formal distance between them was softened by vulnerability. "Mark's been struggling," Cynthia began, her voice trembling. "He's worried about the bills. The kids need things. And without your help, I don't know how we're going to manage." Eleanor nodded, empathy flickering within her. "I understand, Cynthia. But you have to understand why I did this. For too long I was giving until I had nothing left. It wasn't fair to any of us. But can't you just help a little? Just for a while?" Cynthia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Eleanor took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Helping isn't about handing over money anymore. It's about teaching responsibility. You and Mark have to find your own way." The conversation lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken fears and reluctant acceptance. Meanwhile, Mark's visits became less frequent. When they did occur, the atmosphere was strained, small talk masking deeper wounds. Eleanor noticed the subtle ways he avoided discussing finances, his eyes darting away when she asked directly. One Saturday, Eleanor attended a family gathering hosted by her sister Margaret. It was the first time in months she'd seen her extended family. As she entered the warm, bustling house filled with laughter and chatter, she felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with resolve. Margaret hugged her tightly. "It's so good to see you. How are you holding up?" Eleanor smiled, though her heart was heavy. "Better, I think. Taking it one day at a time." Over dinner, conversations flowed around the table. Updates about grandchildren, plans for holidays, work stories. But Eleanor noticed a quiet undercurrent of whispers and glances whenever her name was mentioned. She overheard Margaret's husband muttering, "It's hard to believe she's really cutting them off." The next day, a message from Mark arrived. "Can we meet? Important." Eleanor felt a knot tighten in her stomach but agreed to see him. At the cafe, Mark looked weary, the lines on his face deepening with stress. "I talked to a financial advisor," he began. "We're trying to get things under control. I'm cutting expenses, looking for extra work." Eleanor's chest tightened with cautious hope. "That's a good start, Mark. But it's not enough. The kids need more." Cynthia's worried. "I'm worried," he confessed. "I know," Eleanor said softly. "This is hard. But you're doing the work now. That's what matters." Mark sighed, relief and frustration mingling in his expression. "I want to be better, for you, for them, for myself." Eleanor reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I believe you can." Despite these small victories, Eleanor was not blind to the growing resistance from other family members, particularly Marissa. She seemed to view Eleanor's independence as a direct challenge, a threat to the comfortable control she had long exerted. One afternoon, Eleanor received a curt email from Marissa, thinly veiled with condescension and veiled threats about family unity and responsibilities. Eleanor resisted the urge to reply in anger, instead discussing it with Maya. "Don't let her pull you back," Maya warned. "You're breaking the cycle." Eleanor nodded, her resolve firming like steel. She was learning that true love included boundaries, and sometimes, saying no was the greatest act of care, for herself and for those she loved. As the weeks passed, Eleanor continued to build her new life. She started volunteering at the local library, joined a book club, and even began planning a trip she'd dreamed of for decades, to the vineyards of Tuscany. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sun set in a fiery glow, Eleanor felt a profound peace. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she could not yet foresee, but she was no longer walking it with fear or doubt. She was walking it with courage, with self-respect, and with the quiet joy of a woman reclaiming her life, step by step, day by day. The weeks following Eleanor's quiet yet firm refusal to continue financing her family's life rippled outward like stones dropped in still water. What had once been a steady, if one-sided, flow of support now slowed to a trickle, and for many, it felt like a dam had been suddenly erected. Some struggled to understand. Others were openly resentful. The tension came to a head one chilly autumn afternoon when Eleanor received an unexpected visit. Marissa stood on the doorstep, her posture rigid, lips pressed tight in a way that betrayed more hurt than anger. Behind her, a cluster of people Eleanor recognized immediately: Garrett, Toby, and a few others who clearly had come prepared for a confrontation. Eleanor's heart beat faster, but she steeled herself and invited them in. The house was quiet for a moment as they settled in the living room, the air thick with unspoken grievances. Marissa was the first to speak, her voice sharper than Eleanor expected. "Eleanor, you're tearing this family apart. Your decision isn't just about you, it's about all of us. We're struggling, and you're turning your back when we need you most." Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "Marissa, I'm not turning my back. I'm stepping forward for myself. For all these years, I've been everyone's bank, their safety net, their excuse to avoid responsibility. That ends now." Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe we can find a middle ground? You don't have to do everything, but some support, just enough to keep us afloat." Eleanor shook her head. "I've thought about that, but every time I give, the needs grow. It's a cycle. I want you all to learn to stand on your own, to manage your own lives." Toby, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm trying. I took that job with the lawyer's office. It's not perfect, but I'm working on it." Eleanor nodded, grateful for the small sign of progress. "That's a start, Toby. I'm proud of you for taking that step." The conversation stretched on, a mix of frustration, guilt, and reluctant understanding filling the room. But beneath it all, Eleanor sensed something else, a grudging respect beginning to take root, even if it was buried deep. After the visitors left, Eleanor sat alone in her living room, the house suddenly feeling emptier but lighter. For the first time in years, the weight she had carried wasn't crushing her. Yet the emotional cost was undeniable. That night, she lay awake thinking about the delicate balance she was trying to maintain, between love and boundaries, between family ties and personal freedom. Her phone buzzed softly. It was a message from Rebecca. "Thinking of you tonight. Proud of your strength. Call me when you can." Eleanor smiled, the warmth of her granddaughter's support like a balm on her soul. She dialed Rebecca's number, and soon their voices filled the quiet house with comfort and connection. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's life settled into a new rhythm. Her days were filled with simple pleasures: morning coffee on the porch, art classes that challenged and inspired her, long walks that cleared her mind. She found herself laughing more easily, savoring moments of solitude that once felt lonely but now felt sacred. But even as she nurtured her own growth, the fallout from her decision continued to unfold. One afternoon, Cynthia called. "Eleanor, I won't lie, it's hard. But I'm starting to see things differently. We're making plans, budgeting, and the kids are adjusting." Eleanor felt a pang of relief.
I'm glad, Cynthia.
"That's all I ever wanted, for you to build something sustainable." Cynthia's voice softened. "Thank you for believing in us." Yet not all family members were as receptive. Marissa's calls grew more infrequent and cold. A holiday dinner Eleanor had hoped for was canceled without explanation. The silence was louder than words. In these moments, Eleanor reminded herself that change often came with loss, that shedding old patterns meant sometimes letting go of people who couldn't or wouldn't change. Her thoughts often drifted to her upcoming trip to Tuscany, a dream she had long postponed. Planning it felt like an act of rebellion and renewal. She imagined wandering vineyards, tasting rich wines, and breathing in a freedom that had felt elusive for decades. One evening, as she packed her suitcase, a knock came at the door. It was Maya, her longtime friend, carrying a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. "Thought you might need some company before your big adventure," Maya said, stepping inside. They sat together, the wine flowing and conversation turning to dreams, fears, and the future. "You deserve this, Eleanor. You've earned every moment," Maya said gently. Eleanor looked out the window at the moonlit sky, her heart full. "I'm learning that love isn't just giving. It's knowing when to say no." Maya nodded. "And sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others." As the night deepened, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time she was walking it on her own terms, stronger, wiser, and free. The hum of the airplane engine was a soothing backdrop as Eleanor settled into her window seat. Outside, the clouds drifted lazily beneath her, a vast sea of white stretching to the horizon. For the first time in years, she was traveling purely for herself. No obligations, no demands, no crises pulling her back. Italy was more beautiful than she had ever imagined. As soon as she stepped off the plane, the warm Mediterranean sun wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. The scent of fresh herbs, blooming flowers, and baked bread filled the air. The streets of Florence buzzed with life, artists sketching in sunlit piazzas, lovers strolling hand in hand, the clatter of espresso cups in bustling cafes. Eleanor's days quickly found a peaceful rhythm. Mornings began with cappuccinos sipped slowly at a cafe terrace overlooking cobblestone streets. Afternoons were spent wandering through galleries, tracing the brushstrokes of Renaissance masters. Evenings came with long dinners shared with new friends she met along the way, travelers, locals, and a few kindred spirits who, like her, were seeking something beyond the familiar. One afternoon, sitting beneath a vine-covered pergola at a small vineyard outside Siena, Eleanor pulled out her journal. Her pen hovered over the paper as memories of the past months filled her mind. I never realized how much I gave myself away, she wrote. How my love was measured in money and favors, how my worth was tied to being the family's provider. But here in this quiet beauty, I am learning to love myself simply for who I am, not what I do for others. The vineyard owner, a jovial man named Luca, stopped by her table with a glass of deep red wine. You have the look of someone who carries a heavy heart, he said kindly, but also the eyes of a woman who is ready to heal. Eleanor smiled, grateful for the gentle wisdom in his words. You could say that. I'm learning to find strength in letting go. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca, a snapshot of the new apartment filled with sunlight and fresh flowers. Wish you were here, it said. Eleanor felt a surge of warmth. Rebecca had been her anchor through the storm, the one family member who understood the painful choices she'd made and still loved her without conditions. But distance also brought clarity. Eleanor began to see her family's struggles from a new vantage point, one tempered by compassion, but also by the firm boundaries she had set. She thought about Garrett and Marissa, two adults who had relied too long on her support, who now faced the consequences of their choices. She understood their fears, their frustrations, but also knew that enabling their dependency would only delay growth. One evening, as the Tuscan sun dipped below the rolling hills, Eleanor stood on her balcony, the cool breeze stirring her hair. She allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, tears spilling quietly down her cheeks, not from sadness but from release. The freedom she'd fought so hard to claim wasn't just about financial independence. It was about reclaiming her spirit, her dignity, and the right to live on her own terms. Her phone rang. This time it was Garrett. Mom. His voice was tentative, softer than before. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. And I'm sorry for the way things have been. We're trying, really trying. Eleanor felt a smile spread across her face. I know, Garrett. That means more than you realize. They talked for a while about small things, the weather, Rebecca's new job, plans for the holidays.
No demands. No guilt.
After hanging up, Eleanor sank into her chair, feeling a deep sense of peace. The past was still there with its wounds and regrets, but the future was hers to shape. She closed her journal and looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the night sky. Tomorrow would bring more adventures, more discoveries, and the continuing journey of becoming the woman she was always meant to be, whole, free, and deeply loved. The flight back home was filled with a mix of emotions. Eleanor watched the patchwork of fields and rivers beneath the plane and felt a quiet excitement. She was returning not as the woman who had left, burdened and worn down by family obligations, but as someone transformed, stronger, wiser, and unapologetically herself. The familiar sight of her small town brought a nostalgic smile, but also a steady resolve. Things had changed while she was away. She had changed. Her house greeted her with the same gentle familiarity. The creaking floorboards, the sunlit kitchen, the garden where spring blossoms were beginning to bloom. She stepped inside and breathed deeply, feeling a sense of belonging that was hers alone. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor carefully rebuilt her life, brick by brick. She reconnected with old friends she had long neglected, finding comfort in laughter and shared memories that had nothing to do with family drama. She took up painting again, an old passion she had shelved for decades, and found joy in creating for herself, not to impress or please others. Rebecca remained a constant presence, visiting often with updates about her own life and gentle encouragement. Their bond deepened, a rare thread of unconditional love that reminded Eleanor why she had fought so hard to preserve it. Garrett and Marissa's situation improved slowly but surely. Garrett, finally facing the reality of adulthood, took on greater responsibility, managing finances and seeking stability. Marissa, humbled by the experience, started to appreciate the value of respect and honesty over entitlement. Toby, too, found his footing. The job with the lawyer had given him purpose, a glimpse of what life could be if he stepped up and owned it. Visits with Eleanor became less about asking for favors and more about genuine connection, awkward but promising. One afternoon, as Eleanor tended to her garden, her phone rang. It was Garrett. "Mom," he began, his voice steady, "I wanted to invite you over for dinner. Just us, no drama, no agenda. I want to thank you properly for everything." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. "I'd like that, Garrett." At the dinner table, laughter replaced tension. Stories were shared, memories revisited, and for the first time in a long time, family felt like a source of warmth rather than obligation. The wounds hadn't disappeared, but the healing had begun. Eleanor knew this new chapter wouldn't be without challenges. Boundaries would still be tested, old patterns might tempt them all. But now she was equipped with something more powerful than money or sacrifice: self-respect and the courage to insist on healthy love. In the evenings, she often sat by her window, watching the stars blink awake in the sky. She thought about James, about how he had always believed she deserved happiness and strength. She was finally living that truth. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca, a photo of a small house she was considering buying. "We're building something good," it read. Eleanor felt tears of joy and hope well up. Yes, they were, all of them, each in their own way. As she closed her eyes that night, Eleanor whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I will no longer live for others' expectations. I will live for me, with love, with grace, and with freedom." And for the first time in decades, that promise felt like the most precious gift of all.